Alright guys, good morning. I did the sunrise stream part, but it looks like I did not connect. So I'm now connected, and no talking has gone by. It was a lot of birds this morning. I need to make some adjustments now. Okay, that's better. Fantastic. So I boosted the webcam microphone this morning, and I think I did get a better picture as well. But I have the Yeti mic cables coming in, and so I'm very excited about that. That should improve our capture rate for the birds. Okay, now I want to switch over here. Upper browser, yeah. There we go. We're in Discord. Let's poke Flowey. And let's poke these pimps. How do I get a link? I think that's not right. Well, all this stuff we will learn. There we go. Excellent. Okay. Now what's going on with my... Perfect. Okay. We poked some people. I don't know what is the link to visit this, but I'm sure that's something easy to check out. Okay, so we have a couple of things today. I should get back to YouTube here. Oh, I took notes. I did so many things. Alright, but mostly I'm learning about the stream. The idea is to get this sunrise stream up with an hour of no talking each day, ASMR nature sounds, and so we're excited about that. But there's one that I wanted to find, which is Sabine Hossenfelder. There we go. And so she's a science journalist, which
I never thought.
And she's apparently embarrassed to be German. I found a funny looking video that caught my eye based on my interests. And I think, here's Bill Gates' face. There's one that says Bill Gates is... There he is.
Hey everyone, welcome back.
Hey everyone. Alright, so we'll set this up. Alright, and it's our first stream, so we can poke anybody about it. Okay. I should really have a link, shouldn't I? Oh, I should. Stream settings. That can't be the link. That's everybody's link. Okay. Well, I'll figure it out eventually. I'm not too worried. So the idea is that it's not that starting out we're going to have a ton of people, but this is a good excuse streaming for me to produce these kind of reaction videos, and I have a couple other types of things we can do each day. In fact, before we start this, because I'm still drinking the first coffee, we can do one that I thought of. It's something that I like to do, which is to read the zero hedge headlines. If I'm thinking about news, this is something I like to go through and read, like, no, not pay you money. I want to read the headlines. Wall Street outraged. Oh, listen, this is supposed to be family-friendly stream. Wall Street is outraged by something. I guess that, who cares about that? Oh yeah, this is really interesting. I find this fascinating. I think he could go either way. In fact, I feel like a few days ago I read a headline about him talking to the Harris campaign. But he's looking to where he can make the biggest impact. I think RFK has some interesting ideas. I think it's compulsory to say I don't agree with everything, but I don't agree with everything on anybody, so that's just kind of normal. Now, I have this chat window. Can it pop out? There we go. Can it pop out really well? I'm learning to stream. There we go. I can put it here. That's done. There we go. That looks great. Where's my chat pop out now? I lost it already. Alright, there we go. Goldman Sachs key takeaway from call with Foxconn management. All AI servers continue to ramp up. Positive on the AI servers business. Oh, I see. Yeah. They're selling shovels to gold miners. Yeah, okay, so sure, I'm sure the greatest business in AI is running server farms. It takes such an immense amount of processing power to do these AI things, which is, I think, why we're going to find out that it's not as surprising and yet. They're spending a lot of money, and at a loss too. I mean, the $20 a month subscribers are paying is not paying for these models, and it's possible. I'm not an expert, but I tend to believe that we're seeing kind of the limits. The newer versions are getting worse. So, of statistically populating paragraphs, you can only go so far with that, right? We'll see what happens, but obviously selling the shovels to the miners, that's a classic strategy. I'm sure Goldman does like that. Israel diamond exchange in crisis as exports plummet. Diamonds are cartel anyway. There's no way they should be that high a price anyway, so sorry not sorry, I guess. I don't know. Diamonds. You make diamonds in the lab. 1 million square foot office building. Oh yeah, land. Oh guys, be careful with real estate, right? This says I got a chat. Rainy in Britain. Okay, this is really good. I wanted to definitely touch on that thing in the in different parts of the world. There's different labor costs, and so this is a really big deal, and it's going to change the calculations depending on where you are. Getting people is complicated, and one of my recent videos is about that. But even that said, a lot of people come to areas like Latin America and think it's going to be easy to hire people because it's cheaper. And sure, it is cheaper. But that doesn't make it any easier. In fact, it might make it harder. So there are pros and cons on both sides. Even with cheap labor, there's a lot of complications around farming. And imagine with expensive labor. Obviously, you're going to have a employee handbook ready before they get there because it's just so much investment to bring an employee on. And some of the same strategies can work. Like I'm working with neighbor kids. I don't know if those exist anymore in rural areas in other countries like the UK, but I imagine they must. They must be somewhere. And so you might have to invent your own social contracts, take inspiration from history or what you think might have happened in history, because working with people is complicated, whether they're cheap or expensive. So I hope to do more discussion about that. The issue is I haven't totally solved the problem yet. I've just found some interesting challenges. So we'll definitely be talking more about that. And maybe we can get advice from other people because I'm not an expert. So this is solely PCR testing. If you guys don't know about PCR testing, but I'm not even sure that's what this is referring to. It's probably some guy's initials. EU mulls open-ended immobilization of Russian assets. What does that even mean? It mulls open-ended. Okay, well, let's see if it works. Met Office Records, hottest day. The Met is a theater? I love reading headlines because it's so hard to interpret. Or, I mean, it takes skill. Hottest day of the year weather station next to a massive heat generating electricity substation. So this is something I believe. Okay, so definitely maybe that the world's warming up, but I believe there is a statistical bias in the temperature measuring because we tend to measure temperatures where humans live. And where humans live, we also have been tending to cut down a lot more trees and put in a lot more cement. Don't forget about the heat island effect. But I wonder how much of the observed temperature increase is due to these statistical things, like measuring the weather next to an electrical substation, which of course would produce some heat from all that power friction. How the world listens to music. I thought everybody torrented to their Zune. Taxpayer-funded protesters in London. Taxpayer-funded protesters. That's the hook, right? Hey, straight white men, pass the power. They lost me in the end there. The political matrix sustains the illusion of freedom. I suppose that's about accurate. Beijing rips Biden for peddling Chinese nuclear threat narrative. This is something interesting about China. I've never been there, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions. Seems to be in two camps. Yay, China. No, China. And in my experience, doing the research for ecological restoration and the solutions, China is a big part of that story. They have tried a lot of mostly centrally organized projects to Green Belt Initiative, the limiting the expansion of the desertification. But even in as early as the 70s, one of the first examples was the Loess Plateau that they restored successfully. They've encountered, because of their centralized management style, they've encountered a lot of problems, mainly, to my eye, around biodiversity. They were not using enough biodiversity. They were using monocultures or maybe 1, 2, 3 types of trees, and now they're having pest problems with some of the older ones that they did in the 80s and the 90s. But it seems like the Loess Plateau worked really well because that was designed to bring farmers back, but some of the desert stuff, then they probably gained confidence. Then they said, let's plant a billion trees because they like big numbers too, like we all do. And so their experience, although not perfect, they've been trying for so many years. There's a lot of lessons there. And that was what surprised me the most. Wait, China has restored degraded land like since the 70s? And so it's interesting, they were probably the leaders at some point. I mean, just right as Fukuoka and Mollison were getting started, the Chinese were trying stuff as well. And I think because of their centralized structure, they learned a lot of things, but really then like permaculture became the leader in these things. But all these tools, we have them. Um, so that's the lens which I view China recently, because I don't live in the United States anymore, and I don't live in China either. So I don't feel strongly compelled to agree with one or the other group. Uh, what I found is a very interesting case with a lot of lessons learned when you're able to analyze it. And so um, I know there is scaremongering, but I found that a lot more interesting when I thought about China. Diversity is a false religion to destroy America. Again, this a lot of this seems like fear mongering. I mean, I'm sure there are destructive diversity ideologies. I mean, but destructive ideologies tend to sort themselves out just because they're destructive. And it's okay to help, but help say, hey, no, I don't agree with that, or I don't agree with all of that for these reasons. But I don't know. Seems like a lot of fear. Uh, what's the point of the fear? Maybe to get you to do something you wouldn't otherwise do. Staggering incompetence. Biden's Commerce Secretary is not familiar with the Bureau of Labor. Uh, well, that's surprising, but politics, you have to take it with a grain of salt, right? Because you know, and when you click into these articles, you'll see, but you can generally tell by the headlines, uh, they're also one side or the other. Usually, Zero Hedge leans towards one side, but there's some other too. Northwestern, that's a school, implements mandatory anti-hate trainings following chaotic Gaza campus protest. The only thing I would say about anti-hate is I've been dealing with this personally and with my wife. One of the strategies we've started to do is to say what we want, not what we don't want. Um, and I find that to be true also in terms of like protests. No, 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 no this, no that. Has a certain energy to it, and it's compelling to the human brain, but it's not effective. What I mean, what are you going to replace it with? Like we all know, doing a habit or whatever. You have to replace it with something positive. What is the opposite of hate? Well, I might have some ideas. I'm not sure that Northwestern has the same ideas. When they say anti-hate, they refer to a very specific thing. So I don't know what the positive of that would be, but I'd recommend that they look into that. Don't expect a radical response from Russia to Washington's involvement in Ukraine's invasion of Kursk. Oh, I see. Okay. So people have been worried about a radical response, perhaps a nuclear bomb, which would be so dumb. Uh, we should not be promoting the use of nuclear bombs. Uh, but don't worry, we're not to expect that. Russia won't do that. And, I guess Washington got away with something. I don't know. I have found it interesting, and it's geography. The Kursk is the same region that Germany invaded. Um, but generally, again, I think this is mostly theater, terrible, bloody, awful theater. But I recommend that you say no to violence and move far away from people that don't listen to that. Supreme Court urged to overturn federal ghost gun regulation. Oh, it's a tough one for me. I support decentralization. I tend to think that technology sorts itself out in terms of decentralization. precisely by decentralizing it, we solve a lot of these problems. But this is an interesting case. Ghost guns. As a farmer, I generally support people being able to have guns, but I got no answer. I'm not a professional policy maker. Mostly just a guy who believes that if I'm on my farm here, I can kind of figure it out. And shooting people is already illegal. I don't know. Okay. Ford ditches plans for electrical SUV. I've heard this as industry continues to backpedal from EVs. We'll see what happens. The technology is interesting. I think probably the subsidies have skewed it, and so we're going to see too much. But I generally do think things are going in that direction. With these technologies, they're going to continue to do stuff. Just hand tools, battery tools. I have come such a long way. I'm using like a battery chainsaw. So I'm generally excited about it. I think probably the car industry is going to take a bath sooner or later. But electricity, man, that's got staying power. Zero hedge is thought to be Russian funded, spreading. Yeah, well, yes, I think that's probably, and you could probably say that a little differently, but generally in that direction, right? Zero hedge does what zero hedge has its mission to do, and so I just find that they're a little more open about the ridiculous things. I definitely don't agree with all of the things. I think they're probably pretty good if you're like an investor and you want to watch charts and graphs. So when they get into politics, they're guessing too, like all of us. They're quants, But they have some good authors. I like to read it, and we'll see. I'm open to other sources too. Zero Hedge doesn't filter any of the headlines, but I would go to New York Times as well. One thing I need to figure out. I wonder if they'll let me go here. Yeah, why not? I generally know more about geopolitics and economics and stuff. Sometimes a lot of this stuff to me seems social, but yeah. Okay, so here this one says Robert Kennedy's going to drop out. I think he's making moves though. He'll go wherever. I think third-party candidate could be interesting, but see, yeah, this is too U.S. Let's go to world. I didn't move out of the U.S. to to follow their politics. One challenge I'm having is how much talking versus drinking this coffee I'm doing, but it is working. I'm waking up. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even like the layout. India, a safe place for women. I've never been to India, so I won't say anything. But I would like to go one day. Yeah, I don't know. It's too wide. I need to make it. I'll look into that. It needs to go top down like zero hedge, so I can know what I should be looking at. Okay, moving over. Moving over to this activity. I'll drink a little coffee. Alright, I got a page of notes. Who am I talking to in the chat? I want to thank you, M. I don't know who you are, M, but I appreciate that. It makes me feel like I'm not just talking to myself, which is good. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm gonna take a smoke break. You may notice that I set up my office outside, and so I can smoke right here. I hope it doesn't bother any of you. I have to figure out how to make it work, but we'll take a smoke break. I have some activities to discuss. Because I got together with a friend who's a video editor, and so the idea on this stream is to do a couple of different things. that activity. I like that. I like to read the Zero Hedge headlines. And I'm open to other sites, but they'll have to be, just for my own sanity, they have to be properly formatted. The other thing is the reaction videos. I got another one which I like, but I need to figure out how to make this show. I want it to show the thumbnail. No, I can show the thumbnail. Okay. So yeah, the idea would be to clip onto the stream a reaction video, maybe one per radio show. And also, not today, but one of these days, I could actually, after we went through the news and the daily stuff, we could play a couple of games that I do play. I don't have to stream it, but if I'm on the stream, and one of those is Stardew Valley. And so then I can actually record footage for the show that I'm trying to make, which is, or show series. Really, it's the concept of Stardew Valley in real life. And so that's our goal. I watch these streamers, these Pokemon speedrunners, Zelda speedrunners, Mario speedrunners, all this type of stuff, and the determination with which they find minor improvements is exactly the energy we need. So I would like to do my part to kind of, the framework needs to be there. The rules need to be. Thank you, Em. The rules need to be set, right? So that's one thing. Like a gamer, a young kid, I don't know if these are Zoomers or Alphas, but they're gonna come, and the game has a set of rules, and all you gotta do is play within the rules. And so, if we set up, syntropic agroforestry, or however we want to define it, using a permaculture design system, that has rules, right? The nitrogen, the carbon, the trace elements, the rain, the topography, all of these are rules that we can conceptualize a game. And could you imagine if we had millions of these young people optimizing routes to produce food, to make an income? And I think a little bit of that is happening. Now that I think of that, I think kind of the YouTube videos that I see, I think a little bit of that is happening with dozens and hundreds, maybe even thousands. And so the goal would be to put out that framework, present it in such a way that people would feel good playing this game. And I have a few ideas. I'm excited about that. And everything looks good here on stream. So yeah, I'll just finish up this smoke. Let's see what people said in the Discord. Yep, crickets, Trump man, you know it. But I got M here with me, so that's cool. Yeah, I'm not totally. I don't mind streaming with very few people for quite a long time, especially because I can get this type of content and record for my other things. And if it's interesting to some people, it's interesting. One thing I did want to do is the nature sounds, the ASMR. And I got a better microphone, should be here like Monday, and a GoPro. I need to research sunrise photography because it's not it's way more beautiful with my eyes right now than with the webcam. So I got that GoPro in. I'll probably look for a place to put it because we got some killer sunrises here. Okay. Pierre Roja. Oh, by the way, for those out there, I don't recommend smoking, but if you're gonna smoke tobacco, you should get a type of cigarette without the retardants, flame retardants. Those are really, really toxic chemicals. So try to get non-flame retardant cigarettes, and then just don't smoke them on your vinyl sofa. All right, here we go. Okay, so here's Sabine, and there we go. Sabine made this. Are we the idiots? Bill Gates on planting trees. And her thumbnail, which drew my attention, has Bill Gates, and it says, Bill Gates right? And oh, that got me. Oh man, Bill Gates. Just in the news for saying the best way to combat climate change is to chop down trees and bury them. So I thought maybe it was going to be something like that. Something spreadsheet brain, this math that makes sense on the computer, but it's just like a ridiculous ideas in practice. But that's actually not what it was about. It was about a different conversation. And so let's let Sabine take it away and introduce us to the topic.
Hey everyone, welcome back to our science news. Today we're diving into a hot topic. Bill Gates recently got fired on social media for claiming that planting trees can't save us from climate change. Is he right? Let's have a look, starting with just exactly what he said.
I don't plant trees.
There's a lot of people who are very enamored with
This first thing, I just have to mention this. Who plants the trees, right? Locally, this is a very funny topic, with some people locally claiming that they've planted thousands of trees. And the people that they've hired, their workers, to do that tree planting, behind their back, of course, saying, he didn't plant a single tree, I planted all them trees. Of course, receiving a salary or whatever it was, And so who plants the trees? Is it the guy that pays the dollar, or is it the guy that uses the shovel? I think we can all agree we don't think Bill Gates is actually planting the trees. But the conversation about how he spends his money is interesting. They're going to go in and he spends money to, I think the term is offset his carbon footprint. And so, but he doesn't, with that money, doesn't plant any trees. So
with trees. We've got trees on this stage. Some people would even say that if you just planted enough trees, it could take care of the climate issue altogether.
And that's complete nonsense.
Okay.
I mean, are we the science people or are we the idiots? Which one do we want to be?
The ex-Twitter fallout wasn't nice. You are the idiot, Bill.
You are the idiot, Bill. Okay. Generally, I mean, that makes me feel good inside. I have to admit some bias, I grew very frustrated with Windows operating system. And so I'm sure that I have some lingering resentment for Bill Gates, probably even after he was no longer in charge of Windows. But he was associated with Windows for me, so that Bill Gates guy. But I can support this, right? This in my chest feels really good. Yeah, you're the idiot, Bill. But this is what Sabine, the science communicator, very good. Is it true or is it not true? Can trees help? And so one thing is they're going to define the problem. And so we'll see if it can or can't help with that specific problem. But I think in the end, you guys know I'm going to support the fact that trees solve other things as well. But let's take a look.
Bill deserves to be in prison. Why does anyone listen to this evil man? And one guy used the opportunity to proclaim that Gates is wrong and to promote his tree planting company. I'll admit that I'm one of those people who are very enamored by trees. They're really good listeners, and if they get too boring, you can chop them down and heat with them.
We can't, she will no longer mention this, but we can't forget this part. Trees produce firewood, and that's something I'm a big fan of. And we got, hey Frugal, how you doing? Excuse me, Simon, how are you, buddy? Living in Italy. What time is it in Italy? You guys are what, 7 hours ahead of me? You just eating lunch? What are you up to, Simon? Or is it Simon? Simon. That would be my Wisconsin accent. Simon. Okay, so back to the thing. Then we'll get that in. We'll fix it in post. We'll cut that out. Okay. So trees produce other products, and we can't forget about that. Firewood being one of the main and most valuable ones in terms of energy conservation. But don't forget fruits and other things, habitat for birds.
That said, it makes sense to think that trees can help us fight against climate change. Trees absorb carbon dioxide, use photosynthesis to split it up, store the carbon, and
Trees do all these things. I mean, I'm having trouble. Where's the but? But trees literally do exactly what we need.
release the oxygen. The carbon goes into trunks, branches, leaves, and roots, and over the course of time, some of it gets deposited into the soil. So let's just plant.
So this is an important thing. I think I've been thinking about organic chemistry like this. Some of it gets deposited in the soil. Where do trees come from? Trees come from the air. I watched a video by, I think it's Fenneman, and he said trees come from the air. And when you think about it and go through it, it's true. The carbon of the firewood, carbon chains, comes from carbon dioxide. Nitrogen could come from a bag, but realistically in a living system it comes from N2 from the atmosphere through some microorganisms. So yes, trees get one thing from the soil, that's water. That's all they get from the soil. And whatever's soluble in water, right? They can absorb some other nutrients, but they have to be soluble in water because that's all the roots can pump up. All the other, by weight, elements generally we're getting from the air or something that's been dissolved in water. And you can either, like they do on monoculture farms, put those nutrients on top, and then when it rains it'll get in there and the plant will absorb them. Or you can promote a living microlife in your soil, and they'll move stuff around and generally get the nutrients where it needs to go, because the plant will give them sugar, which sugar is a carbon chain. It came from the atmosphere. Okay, so how does it get deposited in the soil? That is through the roots, I believe. Also the leafy matter as it decomposes. But I believe that root pruning is the way that a lot of the carbon gets trapped in the soil. So when I prune and coppice my bushes, I'm stimulating root pruning and also trapping carbon in the soil, and that'll sprout and we can do it again. So we can sustainably trap carbon in the soil and produce firewood, which is at least carbon neutral energy source.
Trees them and solve all our problems. Indeed, in 2019, a paper appeared in Science magazine saying that we could basically fix climate change if we just plant trees everywhere there's space.
So there it is. The paper said it. It must be true, right?
The authors estimated that this would require about 1 trillion trees, covering an area approximately the size of China. That, so the estimate would remove about 700 billion tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Removing that much carbon dioxide would keep us within the Paris goals if we reached net zero by 2050. This is why some people have enthusiastically said that planting trees has a mind-blowing potential and that forest restoration is overwhelmingly more powerful than all of the other climate change solutions proposed. The paper even gave rise to the 1 trillion trees campaign whose...
Okay, so there it is. We got a campaign to do it. The paper said, the spreadsheet says it's going to work. 1 trillion trees, all we need, just the size of China. And so, even for me already, the problem with planting 1 trillion trees, I was just like, hey, let's do something. Let's set a goal. Let's plant 1 trillion trees. This sort of stuff has tended to result in monoculture, right? I mean, the way to get 1 trillion trees is to find one and do it as many times as you can, as fast as you can. Not necessarily, plant 1 trillion trees. What about the seed bank? What about the trees that come up? So I think this is really interesting, but already I see problems with this program. I wouldn't give money to a program that was trying to plant 1 trillion trees. I would probably look for them to be a little more specific. So already maybe I'm starting to agree with Bill Gates here.
Goal is what the name says, to plant 1 trillion trees to save the world, basically. It's a nice story. Unfortunately, it turned out that the estimate in the 2019 paper was wildly over-optimistic. It was criticized almost as fast as it appeared for overestimating how much land would be available for planting trees and how much carbon the trees would eventually remove. The corrected estimate is about 1/5 of that in the original paper. One also has to keep in mind that trees don't grow on the snap of a finger. It takes decades for them to grow. Not all of them survive, and who will do all that planting anyway?
Okay, so yes and no, right? It does take a long time for them to grow. I'm a little concerned, like, oh no, it's only 20%. It'll never work. Well, but 20%, that seems like a really great start. They don't grow immediately, but I've seen some of these calculations that because I got in a fight about this very topic on Twitter a few months ago, and they used oaks in areas in the northern hemisphere, which obviously grow a lot slower and trap less carbon than, let's say, Guadua angustifolia, the Colombian giant thorny bamboo, traps a lot of carbon, and they aren't spaced nearly as much. And that carbon is also useful in construction. They use oak in the north because that hardwood tends to go into projects that last a long time. But sometimes it ends up as firewood as well, which is one of the drawbacks people mention about planting trees. Well, eventually somebody's going to send it back up into the air. But, I mean, it's a cycle after all, so eventually people are going to dig up the soil. I mean, eventually we can do anything. But getting more carbon into the system is good. And I want to just mention this thing. Not all of them survive, so there's a germination amount. But if we include the seed bank, the natural species, and we don't, manage a monoculture tree lot, but we look for a diverse ecosystem, I think we're going to find out that nature is going to actually give us a multiplier on our efforts. So if we plant 1 million trees, nature might, if we allow her to, plant 4 or 5 million trees for us around those areas with similar types of management. All we have to do is adjust our management to include those. Yeah, grasses are interesting. Grasses have other benefits, though. I'm thinking of, feeding cows. I should show you. There's 2 species. So Simone is telling us about Christmas trees. I used to grow Christmas trees with my grandpa. My grandpa used to grow Christmas trees, and at one point in my life, I was old enough to help him with his job. And so that was one of my first jobs, pruning and transplanting these Christmas trees. And it was like 6 years, 7 years, to get them to be about as tall, 6 foot tall, around 2 meters, maybe 190. And it was required we did about 2 transplants. We planted the seedlings. A year later we transplanted them, and a year after that we put them in the final spot. 3 to 4 years to mature. Had to keep them pruned. Down here in Colombia, they don't do that. They don't buy live Christmas trees. A lot of people will look for, in fact, dead trunks. So one of the things I've been working on pruning up is these branching trunks so that people can hang their stuff on it. No way, Richard Branson started with Christmas trees? Okay, well that is good news. Then we're on good track. I think, okay, I literally can't respond to my chat because I have to log in. Oh man, I lost my chat. I just one click and the chat's gone. Well, okay, I'll figure it out later. Actually, I could pause right now because I'm responding to chat. I'm supposed to do something with a dock. Oh no. I can't believe how easy it was to lose the setup. Oh, where's the chat? Docs, there it is, chat. Boom. Bang, bang. Okay. There we go. Okay, I'm back. Okay, but I'm actually not signed into chat, Simon, so I'll respond to you later. I was gonna emoji that thing. Okay, imagine this is one of those segments the editor's gonna cut out. We're gonna get his work cut out for him today. Okay, so one thing that concerns me is this attitude that if it doesn't fix everything, it's useless. And so I think generally that's a theme of these spreadsheet brain analysis of tree planting.
Science eventually published a correction to the study, and the lead author, Thomas Crowther, said somewhat exasperated that he never said we should plant 1 trillion trees. I get the feeling that he and his co-authors didn't quite anticipate how much attention the paper would attract, and I wasn't even doing science news then. Now you might say that, well, even if the estimate was a factor 5 too high, that'd still be something like 20% of what we need to remove. And yes, that'd be pretty good, but that'd require that we plant trees in basically every corner where there aren't already growing trees, and the trees actually grow there. But good soil and tree-friendly climates aren't easy to find, and if you find them, people would rather use them to grow food.
Okay, this is so important, right? The next argument is there's no place for them. They don't fit. All the land that can support trees is already used up to grow potatoes and corn. Whoops. So obviously this is silly, because precisely that reason we're supporting agroforestry systems for agriculture and more trees in the agriculture. Silvopasture models are very popular, and so there's plenty of space if we include agriculture improvements. But also another point, this morning we were talking about China's lowest plateau, and look at the Pawnee Cup and the work that they're doing in India. They are restoring degraded land, and I think about what is it, the Dust Ups Ranch, the work that Sean is doing, Overton, in New Mexico, I think it is. There's actually more land that we could transition up from desert into pasture, prairie to savanna, or maybe it's savanna to prairie, and then maybe even, Midlands forests and stuff like that. So it's really interesting. There's a lot of potential here, and I think there's a lot more space than scientists recognize, because they have this idea that if I'm growing a potato here, I can't have a tree anywhere near it. It's busy because of the potato. And look at that. We got to fill our urban centers, in the town centers, the city streets. That's a whole different issue, but that urban heat island effect is no joke. If you put some solar panels like chlorophyll, photosynthesis panels, green panels, you're gonna lower the temperature, at least the thermal sensation, and you're gonna lower it at night as well, because that's less energy that's being absorbed by the cement and radiated at night into possibly the clouds.
Food. There's also the issue, as another study has found, that if you plant trees on formerly barren land, then that significantly changes the reflectivity or the albedo of the surface. As a consequence, Earth retains more heat.
Okay, this is another, I mean, these people, and I like Sabine, so I'm not saying she's dumb, but you're dumb on this point. How can you be so blind? You're telling me the white albedo of this barren land is reflecting less than trees that absorb the energy? It doesn't make any sense. But here's the point. So let's say that whatever happens, the albedo does change. It retains more heat. Okay. But a forest, a functioning ecosystem with multiple layers, has much more capacity to retain the heat, right? It has so much more capacity. It's not even comparable. So let's say it retains double the heat, but it's got 100 times the capacity. So net on net, this is not a valid criticism. Oh no, the desert, is going to, retain less heat? It doesn't even make sense. It's more about the heat being retained as a proportion of the capacity of the ecosystem to retain heat. Living systems have a lot of capacity. In fact, you and I are taking some of that heat along with us wherever we go. But that doesn't mean that, we're bad for the environment. We can be bad for the environment, but it has nothing to do with our heat, our personal body heat.
According to some estimates, that could effectively counteract the carbon dioxide removal by 30%. Indeed, another study found that if limiting temperature increase is our goal, we'd be better off plastering land with solar panels than planting trees.
This is the epitome of spreadsheet brain, okay? But at least they've put it into a framework. If our goal is to blindly lower temperatures, okay, so at least we understand that it's a simplifying assumption there. But there is no world where we're better off, as she says, plastering the land with solar panels than having natural ecosystems. You're not adding in some variable. This has to be obvious. When you look at this, we're better at solar panels than planting trees. Now, I'm sure there are areas where this calculation makes a lot more sense than in other areas, but where living systems are viable, this makes no sense. It just absolutely doesn't. Not to talk about these strange materials. Are they toxic? How long will they last? Do an analysis on how much it costs to plaster the solar panels and how much we're going to get over an expected lifetime. Yeah, I mean, I think it could make a lot of money with the low labor costs, but that doesn't mean it's the best thing for the climate. I mean, think about an ecosystem. One thing people say about trees, trees absorb so much carbon, but trees are also habitat for birds and beasts and insects. All of those birds and beasts and insects are also made of carbon, which means that their existence and their ability to live, right, as we restore these ecosystems with or without trees. I mean, what about bushes? Right? What about bushes? There's a lot of bushes. And if we're planting 1 million trees, I'm willing to bet that we're probably we probably have space for at least 10 million bushes between the trees. And generally nature fills that part in for us. But all of that's carbon, plus all of the habitat available will allow the living organisms to, again, trap carbon from those fruits and seeds and nuts and leaves, and they'll start trapping carbon into their own biomass. So the bigger our carrying capacity is for biomass, the more carbon we're trapping. Trees, in the end, might only be a proportion of that amount of carbon that we're allowing to be trapped. To say nothing of the water cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and all the other things that are being benefited by Yeah, I really think that that's the right place for it. Solar is a great solution in urban environments. I've seen some in Sahara Desert that, you know, I'm not going to say anything. I mean, I think that's, if you're going to do plastering, pick a Sahara Desert type place. Or again, an urban environment integrated. Really anywhere integrated. Maybe my biggest critique is the use of plastering the land. And I hope I've been able to show that that just doesn't make sense. If you could have a living ecosystem, there's so much additional benefits. And carbon that they're not counting, right? From trees on down, you know, bushes and shrubs and micro life and then mammals and birds and all of this stuff.
Okay, you might say maybe trees won't fix climate change, but trees are good for other things, right? Like parks are good for your...
She heard me, Sabine. They're good for lots of other things. And mental health is one of them, which is a challenge we face in Western civilization.
Mental health. Trees are known to keep cities cooler, improve air quality, and planting things ought to be good for biodiversity.
It ought to be, and it is, if you plant biodiverse things. The biodiversity will scale up, right? It'll help you out. Monoculture is a difficult thing. If you put in monoculture, it'll try to scale up, but in the end, it only has certain things in it. Usually one of them will end up being a pest. But if you start out biodiverse with 6 to 12 species, main species that you're using, you'd be surprised at how fast nature pumps your numbers up to 100. 100 different species just with the shrubs and the bushes and the herbs and everything that's going on in vines in natural systems.
Too. Well, it's partly right. Monocultures generally aren't good for biodiversity, so you have to be careful with what you plant. But sure, trees are good company. However, if you listen to the Gates quote in context, it's entirely clear that he wasn't dissing trees in general. He wasn't even talking about climate change in general. He was specifically talking about the potential of planting trees for offsetting carbon dioxide emissions. It was a reply after the interviewer asked Gates about his involvement with the carbon removal company Climeworks. Listen yourself.
But are you offsetting your own personal emissions
Yes.
with that? And can you give us a sense of the scale of that?
It's, you know, like 10 million a year.
Okay.
Peanuts.
And just
It's
to be
a variety of things. The Climeworks is part of it. You know, buying electric heat pumps for low-income housing where they...
Okay, so we get to the real context, and we'll see if we can find ourselves here. Bill Gates' goal is to offset his carbon footprint, just his. And it's probably larger than most of ours because he flies around and has bigger houses and so he's got a bigger footprint. He says he spends about 10 million a year. I don't know if that's tons, probably dollars. And he doesn't put that money into planting trees because, and here's what I want to say here, because nobody has put the right model out to capture this rich people money and do it. The examples, the real examples that exist of tree planting projects are generally and have been failures. They failed, and they fail because of things like monoculture and other things. But that doesn't mean it's not going to work. And so I would say that Bill Gates is probably right on the fact that for what he wants to do right now, it's probably $1 spent on, you know, making low-income housing more sustainable, and they get some of the benefits and he gets some of the benefits. I think that is probably his best bet. I think this thing that he's talking about right now is probably better suited to his goals.
They get the benefits of lower monthly bills, and I take the carbon credits for those things. You know, there's you know, solar panels. There's a huge variety of things. I don't use some of the less proven approaches.
such as?
I don't plant trees
And that makes a lot of sense, not just because of the butchered estimate for the potential of carbon dioxide removal by planting trees, but also because a lot of carbon offset projects that relied on reforestation turned out to have prettified their numbers, at least.
So that's exactly right. The ones that we've seen are dodgy, and I think that's honestly all over the climate-based stuff. All the carbon credit stuff is pretty dodgy, in fact. But that doesn't mean we can't try to find the things that are best. I believe there's a model that could work, and we'll see how it happens. I think also my goals are different than Bill Gates' goals. Bill Gates, I think, he's just so big and has so much money that his goal is to look good on the spreadsheet. That's why these guys have spreadsheet brain, because to a certain extent, they're not going to visit every project they've invested in. They invest in all over the world, and, you just want to see it look good on the spreadsheet. They're not going to go there. So the benefits the only benefit that Bill Gates is going to see is his spreadsheet. What about the local people, right? So if a local person lives in an ecosystem that's getting restored, they should see benefits, additional benefits that won't show up in Bill Gates' spreadsheet. So I think there's a key here, and that's our goals as human beings can be different than someone like Bill Gates. His goal is different, so it makes total sense.
At least at the moment, you can't trust carbon offsetting with tree planting, and it makes a lot of sense that Gates spends his peanuts on more reliable approaches. So is Gates right? Science says yes, and keep on dusting those solar panels. Did you know that several studies have found...
I saw a very interesting drone replanting effort for replanting areas that burned down. It says Thunderbolter. Good morning, Thunderbolter. Yes, I believe, for example, the efforts, if you guys have seen these clay balls, they use clay and they put a bunch of different native seeds in clay balls and they throw them around. This, to me, can you call it tree planting? Not really. It's more like feeding the native seed bank. And some of these balls obviously will fall in the wrong spot, won't work at all. But a lot of them will have multiple of their seeds sprout. They'll get into the right place and they'll accelerate right after a pruning or a cutting or a burning. The soil gets a lot of this growth energy. It needs to quickly cover itself. So the fact that they put those seeds right where they need to be at the time, to me, seems way more efficient than... and this is as somebody who's done a lot of tree planting. I think I've seen in the last 10 years a lot of the failures locally. We did, a few years ago, my wife was working with Selva, and they did a tree planting projects focused on restoring ecosystems for an endemic endangered bird, a pair of endemic and endangered birds, the leptotila conoveri and the Atlapletes flaviceps. And we had learned a bunch of stuff, and so we said, well, the best way, and obviously the organization Selva also had some ideas, generally within tree planting communities or ecological restoration communities. We know that since the 70s, a lot of different ideas have failed, conservation being the big one. Now we try to adjust ecosystems with humans, not remove all humans. And one of the ways that they did that was taking local farmers, voluntary participants who wanted to, for example, had a river or a water source that they wanted to expand or enrich the borders, lot lines as well between two farmers. If we could get them to agree, we could expand the lot, kind of instead of a lot line, we could expand it to a lot strip, to 3 or 4 or 5, even 5 meters. And so a lot of that was going really good, and the local people were excited about it, and they planted 25,000 trees or somewhere around there, I think. And locally, people got so excited, and they wanted to kind of get in on the action, right? Everybody's talking about planting trees, and so they went out, and the mayor at that time with his crew and whoever, they probably contacted somebody like, you know about trees, right? How do we do it? And so they sent out the day before men with machetes to clear the area so they could plant the trees. And so what we ended up with the next day was this marketing event where it was clear that they had chopped down, I mean, what any normal person that isn't in Colombia would call a forest, because the regeneration things grow pretty tall pretty quick. It was a young, natural regeneration of, different native trees, but they had literally chopped down a forest to plant some trees. And it was really funny because also the species of trees they plant are these high value secondary forests. They should have been planted in the shade of those other trees, but instead they're planted in direct sunlight. They struggle. I actually haven't been back there to tell you if they lived or died, but generally they're going to struggle in direct sunlight. They would be much better if you clean up underneath the natural regeneration and planted them. But that's the story of tumbar monte para plantar árboles, to chop down the forest so you could plant some trees. I think a lot of that is going on in the world, and obviously that doesn't make sense. But to analyze the benefits, to come to a conclusion about the benefits of tree planting based on projects that are of that quality, chopping down native forests to plant monoculture plantations of sometimes even species from other countries like the eucalyptus. Nothing wrong with having a few eucalyptus spread around your farm, but a monoculture plantation of them causes a lot of problems. So I should come to a conclusion here. Thank you guys so much in the chat. It's motivating me. What was my okay? Cut. Okay. Go. All right. So in conclusion, planting trees and projects that plant trees are not the same as the potential for planting trees in all areas of measurement, including carbon capture, biodiversity promotion, and other ecosystem services. Cut. Okay. All right. I think I made something there today. That'll be good. It might be a 30-minute video, but 30-minute response video. But thank you, Sabine. Good. Thank you, Sabine. All right. 7:10. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I wonder, how's that webcam? I wonder, is that better? This place here, we can visualize the leptotila conoveri, the Tolima dove. And I did catch in our first stream, you can see it on YouTube, like 101, you got the leptotila. There's about 3 or 4 minutes where it's walking around there. And it's endangered dove that it's Colombia's only endemic dove. So the only dove that only exists in Colombia. And it's just in our region. And this leptotila, which is here on our farm, I'm going to downgrade here from 2 sweaters to 1. Now it's getting nice morning time. So this endangered endemic dove loves to walk around on our farm, and it was in fact named the municipal bird, and it's associated with coffee growers as well because it likes these clearings. So you can see, like, between the plants we've kind of cleared it out. The weeds or whatever will keep growing until they're taller than you. But then at a certain point, the dove it can't like walk around anymore. So it'll look for different clearings, and it picks up little seeds that have fallen from the trees. And so together with my wife and the fact that it exists on this farm, we've compiled a lot of evidence about the Tolima dove, what it eats, and especially we've associated with one particular plant. Oh, here's something really cool. Boconia frutescens. It's Latin, so it actually might be Bosonia, but I'm not sure. I say Boconia. So this is another plant like the Cecropia peltata. This is an invasive, a terrible invasive species in Hawaii. They call it parrotweed, but it's native here, and it has these big, beautiful seed pouches that hang. Here we go. Let's take a look here. And they have a little, it must be delicious little fruit. I've tasted it, it's a little sweet. But birds will get them in the tree and then shake them down to the ground too. There's just so many of them, tons. And another, just like the jarumo, the trumpetwood tree, snakewood tree. In fact, it's on the list of 100 most invasive alien species. Yeah, okay. A hockey puck covered in hot sauce. Oh, what? Link me. Where are the links? I want to watch that. So yes, this Boconia, this is one of the species we've identified and linked to the endemic endangered Tolima dove. And I think there's probably a poem in there. Look at this one. Yes, this is how it kind of gets. All of those are seed pouches, and so they have seed and fruit. And all the tanagers and they get up there and they'll shake it out, and eventually the Tolima dove comes around in the ground and picks up the dry fruits, kind of scratches and looks around there. I'll put up here too, Cecropia. Did I get it right? No, Cecropia. This is the, what do they call this in English? Trumpet tree, trumpet bush, snakewood tree. It's listed as one of the world's 100 worst invasive alien species. But it's native here. So generally, and one of the things about the jarumo that I love so much, I love this tree. It has big, huge fruits for the birds. And my wife has gotten so many great pictures thanks to these. These are the fruits. It's basically just like a massive gummy worm for these birds. They're just, look at them go. Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, is there a bird in there? Well, imagine there were a bird in there stuffing its face like it couldn't get enough. Those are the types of pictures my wife takes. Who's that? An animal? Yeah, somebody's in there. So the one thing that I love about this, besides the fact that it brings so many birds, is that it cannot cope with being shorter than anybody else. It will stretch. It will not produce a lot of branches until it's the tallest thing. It will penetrate any level canopy. It will go as tall as it needs to between other trees until it is emergent. And this helps us because there are species that do this, that can coexist in the bottom canopy or will try to penetrate. And I found that this is one of the things that most surprised me, and I've been trying to use it to my advantage. But basically, if we raise the canopy, we can get certain types of trees to grow taller and straighter. And the thing that I've been using to push my canopy higher is the jarumo, the Cecropia peltata. It will grow higher than the highest tree around it, and then For example, another native tree, lombricero, which we have, he'll do the same thing. He's slower, but he needs to be the tallest. And so I'll let the jarumo go, it'll branch out, and I'll wait for the lombricero to beat him, and then I can cut down the jarumo, right? There's others, we have more, it's done its job. But the next jarumo, of course, will beat the lombricero. And so then he'll go, and over the course of years, what we're trying to do is raise our canopy. We're trying to increase the verticality, getting us more 3D space, which will give us more area to harvest yields, for habitat, for basically everything we do. We're going to be able to do better because we have more surface area, more 3D space in a vertical direction. Vines, for example, more space for vines. And so these are some interesting things. I've thought about it, and I wouldn't mind feedback from you guys. How can I do a video? You know, I want to do a video about Cecropia petata, but I think it needs to be edited. It's going to have to end up being edited. So there's certain type of content I can do live, and then my goal, of course, is to work with the video editor and start to produce content more like these video gaming channels, which is highly edited, compelling, with a mission, right, to kind of like present these things as if they were in the game, you know, like gotta catch 'em all. I've got a Pokedex of native species of trees, you know, and thus, because we know the trees, now we can start identifying the birds and the mammals. And man, you should see these eBird and iNaturalist accounts. Like identifying species of plants and animals is fun. It's a game. A Japanese, Simone says, there's a Japanese technique of growing a tree on a tree. That's really interesting. And we have one, I believe it's a type of rubber tree or a type of that, which they call matapalos. And Mossy Earth actually had a video about the matapalos recently. Hold on a second. And we got this matapalos, and this tree is so great. It consumes the tree, right? So like we have one down on this gigantic avocado tree, which, you know, maybe it could continue to grow. It looks to me like it's a little old, but this big old rubber tree is starting to like eat it, and so I'm so excited because that tree is going to be, it's going to be at that level. It's going to be starting from the biggest tree, and it's going to become like an even bigger tree. So it makes me really excited. Obviously, if it was like my favorite tree it was starting to eat, then killer tree. Okay, we definitely need to. Let's watch it. Let's just watch it on a stream.
Keystone species come in all shapes and sizes, and sometimes appearances can be deceptive. Not only could a species with a huge impact initially seem to be quite insignificant, it could even be mistaken as harmful. Last time we looked into European flat oysters in Scotland, but today we're all the way over in Ecuador to look at a species that couldn't be more different. Of course, in a place like the Amazon there are countless species we could talk about, but we'll save all the charismatic birds, snakes, monkeys and frogs for another time, because
so obviously they're close to us. If you don't live in South America, that's close. Obviously for us, it's not close. You know, probably like 24-hour bus ride to get to wherever they're at, or even further because they're off the beaten path. But they're at a lower elevation than us. We're a little bit higher elevation, but a lot of shared species and shared strategies. Take a look at this. This is like an example. It subsumed a tree, but then the tree rotted out from the inside, and so this rubber tree has this like start in terms of height and verticality, but it's got a long way to grow, but it's already, you know, however many meters high.
here we have a tree killer. This is the shortleaf fig, known locally as the matapalo, but you may know it by a common name it shares with several other fig species, the strangler fig. While I'm still at home in the UK, Duarte's been busy filming a series of videos at our project site in Ecuador. Those will start releasing soon, but for now we have someone on location.
So to continue our conversation about keystone species, I want to introduce you to a rather unexpected one, and that is the strangler fig. And I know we're next to a house, but this was a particularly striking individual. I needed to show you this because look, you can see essentially the palm is being completely enveloped by the strangler fig, and this will eventually kill the tree. It will kill the palm tree. But it so happens that the strangler fig is a keystone species. It's really important in its ecosystem, and it supports a wide variety of species. So in this video today, we want to explore that a bit further.
This plant is a hemi-epiphyte. It starts its life high up in the canopy of a host tree and grows up towards the light while growing its roots downwards, either along the host tree trunk or through the air. Eventually these aerial roots make contact with the soil, rapidly growing into the ground and rooting the fig to the rainforest floor, while the roots expand and thicken to become more like interweaving tree trunks. This method of growing allows the fig to avoid the harsh competition for sunlight, space and nutrients on the rainforest floor, instead taking advantage of a tree that already won that battle. As it grows over time, it will completely encircle and constrict the host tree, preventing the main trunk from expanding. The leaves of the fig will also be outcompeting the host tree's foliage while this happens, ultimately resulting in the fig cutting off its host supply of nutrients and killing it. The host tree then decays, providing nutrients for the fig tree in the notoriously poor rainforest soil. It's pretty easy to see where it got its more sinister name from. It's a killer tree that kills trees.
So here you can see one of the reasons why the matapalo is considered a keystone species. You can see all of this fruit around us and all of the little fruit flies that are here as well.
And with regards to our previous discussion, all of these organisms are carbon-based life forms. So I know that a gnat, fruit fly, doesn't weigh very much, but there's millions of them. Supported by, for example, that one tree. And so these are some carbon calculations that I think are not being taken into consideration when we're rebuilding habitats instead of just, spreadsheet braining monoculture tree plantation.
And Freddie was saying that, maybe you can explain, Freddie, with the...
The matapalo, it's a strangle fig. People think it's bad because it's killing other trees. But if you look from another side, it is important because it's providing food for many animals and birds, especially birds and bats as well. You can see hundreds of tiny seeds can be eaten of the birds when the birds make poop on somewhere, sitting on the main tall trees. Matapalo will start to grow there.
So that's how they spread around.
Yeah.
But then that's also really nice because they're, so they kill some trees, but they also provide food for so many animals.
Yeah.
So they're really important species.
Really important.
And it's what kind of animals will be eating this?
Oh, toucans and tanagers and squirrel monkeys and all monkeys, let me say, and parrots. And on the ground, rodents like wanta, paca.
And here also the fruit flies as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of...
So that's similar to the Cecropia peltata. I would also consider it a keystone species. It feeds a lot of birds, but also, for example, the sloths, the 3-toed sloth and the 5-toed sloth. Anyway, there's two types. One is definitely a 3-toed, and they love the jarumo. And the Cecropia peltata is also useful for some indigenous reasons. They like the leaves. Gives a really alkaline ash, the leaves, and so they use that for certain different things. And generally, these less understood species are really key parts. Invasive species in other parts, we're just learning now what they're good for, where they came from. I'm not saying that they have to leave them in Indonesia or Hawaii. But these species support a lot of wildlife, and so we're just starting to understand that in the ecosystems where they come from.
Globally, fig species are known to feed over 1,200 vertebrate species, and the matapalo is no exception. This species fruits year-round and provides a hugely important food source for many fruit-eating species, especially when other fruiting trees aren't in season and food is more scarce. Without this food source, the rainforest frugivore populations would likely plummet, and as other fruiting plants rely on those species for seed dispersal, you could definitely argue that they too rely on the fig to thrive. This means that the fig supports far more trees than it kills just because it produces its fruit at different times, and the reason for this unusual fruiting pattern is because of the fig's peculiar pollination method. Like all figs, this tree has a mutualistic relationship with a local species of fig wasp, in this case this Latin name that I can definitely pronounce but choose not to. Rather than the usual flowers you might imagine, figs produce ciconia, which in a heavily simplified sense for the purposes of this video are like an inverted fruit/flower that technically contains multiple tiny flowers. The only way for a pollinator to access the flowers within the syconium is to squeeze through the ostiole, which is basically an interlocking entrance that loosens slightly when ready to be pollinated. Each species of fig has its own species of fig wasp that's uniquely able to get through the ostiole. However, despite only being a few millimeters long and well adapted for the purpose, it's still a tight fit and they'll typically lose their wings and antennae in the process. Some species of fig wasps even bite their own limbs off to get through, and it's quite common to find dead wasps stuck partway through the ostiole. But this risk is worth it, as the wasp relies entirely on these fruits throughout its life cycle. This wasp and the matapalo are completely dependent on each other, and this method of pollination is exactly why the fig trees flower and fruit asynchronously while other fruiting species don't. The wasps have
So obviously not the main point of this video, but this is super interesting, and I wonder how many other of these species are just one insect species away from not being able to continue to propagate themselves. That's a scary thing, and why these original and tropical American ecosystems need to be studied quick. There's a tendency, I know I've talked about this before, to come in and plant species, and there was this tendency in the 1500s to come in and plant the species that we know work, and eucalyptus is one of them. It's a great species of tree, and again, like I said, it's totally fine to have some eucalyptus, but at the expense of all of these valuable native species, we can't do that. So identifying and learning about this is the first step, because you can't protect what you don't understand. You can't value what you don't understand.
Have very short lifespans, so if there weren't any trees ready to receive the wasps when they emerge, the pollinator wasps would quickly go extinct locally, and the fig tree in turn wouldn't be able to reproduce. At all stages of their lives, these wasps are also preyed upon by numerous insectivorous species that would lose a food source without the fig tree. So could you call this tiny wasp that doesn't even have a common name a keystone species in turn? Since they're mutually dependent, you could definitely make an argument that the wasp is responsible for the impact of the fig as much as the fig is responsible for the wasp's impact. This is just one of many examples of how complex ecosystems are and the limitations of terms like these, but I'm supposed to be talking about a tree here and I've probably derailed this enough. Of course, like any tree, the fig provides a habitat for a huge variety of species, but when the fig does kill its host, its impact only continues to expand. The dead host will rot away, supporting species that rely on deadwood in the process, and once it's gone, the fig tree will continue to stand and grow, with its interweaving and now hollow trunk providing the perfect hiding and nesting spots for many species in the rainforest. Out of all of this, the only loser seems to be the host tree of the fig, and while that's definitely true, there have been some studies that suggest trees with strangler figs growing around them are more stable during storms and less likely to be uprooted. I'm not sure how much of a comfort that would be while slowly being starved of nutrients, but it's a very thin silver lining for the host at least. Of course, the fig is still far from a desirable lodger, which has led to several species developing some interesting adaptations to keep.
So this is super interesting. I mean, thinking about that deadwood is so important in ecosystems to surprising extent, and not just for fungi and soil organisms, but birds and mammals as well. One thing I noticed that the trellis, once the tree trunk rots off, that famous scene in the Jungle Book was obviously a matapalo tree. I just realized that.
Keep them off.
You can see the little hole coming out, and the cecropia tree is basically it's keep clear.
So he's talking about Cecropia. That's the Jaruma we've been talking about. And so Cecropia has a technique to prevent being the victim of a matapalo. And other trees do as well. I think guava is one. But we'll see. And the eucalyptus also peels off its bark.
Nothing is growing on the trunk because they have a symbiotic relation with a little yellow ant. They kill any other plants growing on the Cecropia, and that's why Cecropia is providing home. You know, it's like a little apartment they're living. You can see little hole. When it's dry, look at this. Yeah, they live inside.
So how does the Cecropia prevent the matapalo? It gets its ants to do its bidding and to clean everything off. Very interesting. It has its own association with different insect species. Here on the farm, our Cecropias, I have found 5 different species of ants that seem to be associated with it. He says a yellow ant. I think I've seen the one he's talking about, but we also have other ants that seem to also participate in the Cecropia peltata.
And decompose so quick.
So this tree is also a pretty interesting one that Freddie showed us. And what it does here essentially is every year it essentially sheds its bark to avoid any other vines or plants or animals of climbing on it, and it gets this like really smooth trunk in the end. So it looks quite unusual, and it looks like, you know, it's lost its clothes and its clothes just fallen down just like that.
When hearing that this tree kills other trees, you might assume that the species has a negative impact on this environment, but ultimately the strangler fig directly supports hundreds if not thousands of species in this ecosystem, as both a source of food and as a habitat. It's safe to say that if it were to go extinct, you'd also see a vast ripple effect of other extinctions, but fortunately this tree is listed as least concern and is about as safe as a species possibly can be. However, instead this entire ecosystem is what needs protecting. I'm sure you don't need reminding about the extent of deforestation in the Amazon and the need to protect it and its amazing biodiversity, but that's exactly why we're here. Thanks to the support and funding of our members, we purchased a rainforest in Ecuador back in August 2023, which protects around 200 hectares. The land was purchased under the advice and management of Freddie, our new colleague who spoke earlier in the video. He's spearheading all of the work we're undertaking here, and as someone from the Amazon who's dedicated his life to protecting this rainforest, it couldn't be in better hands. Next up in this series,
So I love the work Mossy Earth is doing, and just recently they got a property close to where we're at. Would be a big dream to do a crossover with our organization Quintesencia Taller and Mossy Earth, but maybe one day in the future. That's quite exciting to me. So Simone sent me a picture. Where did you send me this picture? Oh, I found it. I so good. Oh, why isn't it bigger? Tree in a tree. Oh, this is really interesting. And then it grows really straight. This is not that dissimilar to what we're working on with the Nazareno and the Viburnum. I'm gonna have to look into that. Somehow they stimulate these, I imagine. But this is very interesting. They do, that looks like a cypress tree to me, which we have some cypress trees. Live streaming. Yeah. Okay, here we go. You can see what I see. I don't know if poles means... I mean, that's a type of lumber. I was thinking you were talking about polacks. But okay, fantastic. So at this point in the show, I could do a couple of different things, but I think today I might start winding down, and that's because I have workers coming. I have workers coming at 8 o'clock, but next week I will adjust that. I will make sure they know what they're up to before they get here, so that I don't have to be pending around 8 o'clock. I want to thank you guys for stopping in. Kevin, Simone, M. Thank you for chatting. That really helped. We're going to try to make this a little bit more regular. Probably continue with every other day for now. But as I get this figured out, I will definitely start scheduling the streams, and we'll move forward. The only other thing that I thought that I might get in today was to start a round of Stardew Valley, but I think I'll save that for the next stream when I can go into later time. So guys, that's it. I'm wrapping up the stream. Thank you so much. And well, I'll start scheduling them. You know, we could do this. I got a ton of video backlog to go through, and I really enjoyed reading the headlines. It's so fun. It makes me kind of, you know, because things are so touchy right now, and so I consider that I somewhere middle of the road between two extremes. But reading headlines is so much fun. You know, because it's anyways, it brings up all those fun public speaking things. I want to make sure to not say anything wrong that might offend anyone, or maybe you might want to offend someone. We'll see what happens. I don't really like offending people, but and that's going to depend on the news source again. I checked out New York Times today. I don't think so. I don't know that I can do it justice. Byron grows. Yes, I've got some great videos from Byron. In fact, he's got great syntropic. He visited somebody, and I don't know if it's Costa Rica, but they got a great steep slope syntropic video that I watched, and it's definitely on my list. I love Byron. He was one of the first syntropic guys that I found, and I've been quite impressed because I didn't study syntropic agriculture. When I was just as we were getting started, I found mention of Ernst Goetsch and watched some of his videos, but it wasn't like principles. He was just saying, hey, look what's possible. Some of the earliest videos of Ernst's work that kind of came out, and so it was motivating to me. Yeah, look what Ernst did. But it didn't seem like, or at least I didn't get the principles behind it, which just now with Byron, Groves, and a few other people in the syntropic, we're seeing that these principles are being distilled into the different techniques that are being used. And so I'm definitely looking at Byron's going to be a big part because I think he did some of the best breakdown videos. Pulling apart the different threads so we can put it into an active framework with the design system, strategies, and techniques in that order that can help us maybe encourage others to play this fun game. All right, guys, talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Next stream we'll be scheduling for Saturday, and we'll see you then, hopefully. Have a good day. God bless you.